SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it's a diagnosis that we make often in people who present with abdominal bloating, feeling of distension, feeling of fullness, feeling of gassiness. And there are tests that we can perform for it, as well as treatments. And one of the treatments is actually one of the recommended treatments for irritable bowel syndrome, which is rifaximin. But I'll actually defer to Dr. Howard to expand on that.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and again, SIBO is one of the hot topics, like celiac, in medicine right now. But like Dr. Sultan said, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So if you remember when we talked about the small intestine and the large intestine, the small intestine is mostly without a lot of bacteria. Now there's not no bacteria in there, but there's fewer bacteria. When you get to the colon, that's where most, thousands plus of bacteria are. And if you remember, like what we talked about with lactose intolerance, there's a lot of overlap between lactose intolerance and SIBO. They have a very similar concept. In lactose intolerance, remember, if you are able to break down the sugars and absorb them, things go very well. Those sugars don't get down to the colon where the bacteria are. The bacteria can't digest them and cause the gas and the diarrhea. And if you have lactose intolerance, those sugars go down there and go to the colon and cause problems. Well, if you take those bacteria from the colon and move them up into the small intestine, which is what happens in small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, those bacteria, even if the small intestine is working appropriately, those bacteria can get to those sugars before the small intestine is done with them. And those bacteria chomp down on those sugars, produce that gas, produce those other acids that cause the symptoms. So that's why it causes that gas and bloating. Now, there's different ways to treat that. Well, first you can detect it by doing a breath test. And the long and short of it is that you take in some sugar, wait a certain amount of time, blow into the sensor, and if there's increased hydrogen and methane where there shouldn't be, that's consistent with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Now, you can take antibiotics that will kill those bacteria off, and that can cause improved symptoms. Some people feel better for a long time, never have more issues again. Other people may feel better for a short period of time. Another thing we can do is we can work with, like Dr. Tagan, our nutritionists, dietitians, because if you decrease the sugar that people are exposed to, if you do like a low FODMAP diet, which is these certain sugars, if you minimize those sugars that you eat, then you decrease those sugars being presented to the bacteria in the small intestine, and so they don't cause those symptoms.